to have a bigger, better discussion. But the fact of the matter is, the desperate crisis of American politics isn't really the money, per se. It isn't our horrible electoral process, right? We have a crazy electoral process, right? We elect a president and a Congress, and sometimes they all are in sync, but then within 2 years we usually throw it all out of sync, so that nobody can ever really get much done. You realize the rest of the world doesn't do that. The rest of the world, you have an election, you have a mandate, it's clear where the people are at, and then who you've elected goes and governs. We don't do that. Now, in many ways, I like the separation of powers and all that, and especially when George Bush was president, I really enjoyed it. If only they had used it, but they didn't. They still authorized them to go and do all sorts of horrible things. So our separation of powers doesn't work very well. So what we end up is the worst of both worlds. We have separated power, right? But very little gets done. We have dysfunction, and so that's really bad. We have an electoral college, so in case the people actually elect somebody interesting, we can make sure that they don't take, the Supreme Court can intervene and mess with that. And then we have gerrymandering of our congressional districts to make sure that most of them aren't even competitive. And we have a media system that's in terrible shape, and we got all this stuff. I can list it all, but that's not the worst problem. The worst problem in America today is that most Americans don't know the range of options that are available to them to solve the problems that this country has. And that is a crisis circumstance. Because we literally do not respond in a realistic or rational way to basic challenges. And I don't care whether a Democrat's in charge or a Republican is in charge. The basic problem is we don't respond with all the range of options. And let me give you an example of this. If you're in your car in New Hampshire and you skid off the road into a ditch, right? And somebody comes to you and says, I'm going to give you 2 options here. I've got this pump. You can pump your tire up and put more air in it. Or I've got some oil for you. You put some oil in. And you're like, actually what I need is a push or a pull, but I don't need oil or to pump up my tire. And they say, no, well, I'm sorry. I say, I'm sorry. A push to get you out of the ditch, that's off the table. We're not discussing that approach. We're not discussing that option. Well, we have taken so many things off the table in America that by and large, when we have an election and we think, wow, something happened here, big deal, then they say, well, no, we're not actually going to do anything with this power, except to make sure that very wealthy people get a little bit wealthier. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. 2009. President Obama was doing an interview. Now, I want to emphasize that the last 8 years in this country, our main discussion has been about socialism. It's been a fabulous discussion about socialism. It's been very rich, very, very engaged. Long before Bernie Sanders came along. I'm sorry. Bernie Sanders is a pretty amazing guy, pretty impressive guy, but I want to be blunt with you. He is not the great champion of discussions about socialism in this country. He's not the guy who's pushing socialism into our discourse. He's not the guy who's saying, oh no, or the person who's saying there's something bigger here, there's these big ideas. No. There's somebody who has been at the forefront of bringing this up at every turn, courageously bringing it up, even when nobody else is discussing it, even when you don't think there's any possibility that it can come up. And I speak, of course, of Sarah Palin. Because Sarah Palin has been saying, since Barack Obama got elected president, well, we're creeping towards socialism. We're moving towards socialism. And I was struck powerfully by a thing that actually inspired me to write the book. Was in 2009, Sarah Palin was on, and I get my information where everybody else does from Fox. And so 2009, Sarah Palin is on Fox. And she's talking to Sean Hannity. So I knew this was going to be a good discussion. And they're talking about weatherization of windows. Making sure that the wind doesn't come in through your window in the winter. Now, I know New Hampshire folks don't think about that, but in a lot of, where I come from in Wisconsin, we like to have a nice warm house. And so they're talking about weatherization. The Obama administration had proposed some tax credits and some encouragements for people to do weatherization of their windows. And Sean Hannity said, you know what that is? And Sarah Palin said, I think I do. And Sean Hannity goes, what is it? What is it, former Republican nominee for Vice President of the United States? And she said, socialism. And it struck me that if weatherization of windows is socialism, right? We got a real problem in this case. Or maybe things are really great because, you know, if that's where you